The quarterback position at South Carolina over the last decade or so has been quite interesting. You had star players such as Connor Shaw and Steven Garcia, and then a lot of guys who were seemingly average. Jake Bentley was decent, Ryan Helinski showed flash, Spencer Rattler has been alright, and Dylan Thompson was also pretty solid. There are definitely a couple names who have been a bust or not lived up to their hype, and technically speaking, one of those players is Luke Doty. Coming out of high school, he was one of the top quarterback recruits in the country, was at time nearly considered a 5-star player, and was by far and away supposed to be the future of the Gamecocks program. Some of it has been his fault and some of it hasn't, but right now, Doty has been a quarterback bust so far, and in today's video, we're going to talk about why. We're going to go through his insane rise, talk about why he was a young prodigy quarterback, and also why his Carolina career has not gone to plan. But before we get started, quickly be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football content, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now, let's get started and talk about what happened to Luke Doty. Going back in time, Doty grew up in the Palmetto State, but it was never a house divided. Luke was a huge Clemson fan, as he said, quote, "My grandparents have always loved Clemson, and that comes from my mom's side. We've grown up watching Clemson games and going to my grandparents' house and spending time with them, watching all the Tigers games, so it's definitely in our family." His parents came from an athletic background as they played at Erskine College, and they passed it down to their son Luke. By the time he was in middle school, Doty had taken football very seriously and was starting to make waves in the area as the next big thing. He'd eventually arrive at Myrtle Beach High School with a ton of hype and would deliver on it. In 2016, after his freshman year, Doty was seen as the next generational prospect in the area as he gained early interest from South Carolina and from Coastal Carolina. That school's not too far down the road, and this was before they were a bigger program. His first Power 5 offer would come from North Carolina, but his recruitment would quickly go national. He didn't get on the field much early on despite his immense talent, as a sophomore, their coach made a difficult decision to go with the senior veteran instead. His coach said about Doty, quote, "What do you need me to do? We started him at receiver, and we had to get him on the field somehow. I personally clocked him at a 4.4 40-yard dash time as a sophomore as well." So why was this guy a big-time recruit? Well, it starts early for quarterback recruiting, and 2, he did so well at camps and had so much potential that he was listed as the top gunslinger in the state. As a sophomore, Doty would pass for over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, but had 7 picks. His talent was there, but he would need to clean up his mechanics and his turnovers if he ever wanted to get those big-time elite offers. Before his junior year, he ended up gaining offers from schools such as Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Miami, and was hoping to gain one from Clemson. He ended up camping there, but they seemed more interested in DJ Uiagalelei, and eventually took an in-state preferred walk-on in Hunter Helms instead. The Gamecocks ended up recruiting him insanely hard, and eventually, Doty chose them. He said, quote, "The coaches have always been really good to us, and they've been there from the beginning. That was actually the very first place we went on a recruiting visit, so that played a big part of it." Another thing was being able to play for his home state school, as they sat down and talked about it as a family, and they thought it was a huge honor to play for their state and represent South Carolina. Those were the factors that ended up leading him to pick the Gamecocks, and eventually he would pop off. His junior year, he threw for over 3,000 yards and also rushed for over 700 yards. He finished with 43 total touchdowns and won a state championship. Yep, he delivered on it and showed that he was worth all the hype. His senior year, though, would end bittersweet, as both Doty and Myrtle Beach would end up losing the state title game, as both Doty and his team ended up missing the state title as he hurt his hand early on in the playoffs. He still passed for 1,876 yards and 25 touchdowns, and ended up becoming the Mr. Football Award winner for the state. He definitely could have reopened his recruitment and went to a bigger school, but he never wavered from the Gamecocks because of how they made him feel. The Gamecock staff always made him the #1 priority. He said, quote, "They just kept reiterating to me that I'm their guy, and that I'm #1 on their board right now as far as 2020 goes. They really want me at South Carolina." He would decide to enroll early, and the coaching staff could not wait to get him on campus because of his on and off the field impact. His high school coach said, quote, "I'll tell you this, and it's my personal opinion, but Luke Doty's a winner. He's going to find his way on the field and play quarterback at the University of South Carolina, I can promise you that." Luke would go on to become one of the best quarterbacks in the city of Myrtle Beach area's history, and he was throwing the ball to superstar wide receiver Adam Randall, who is now at Clemson. Now he would hope to throw to some more SEC-level playmakers and finally deliver on the hype he had been building for a couple of years now. According to 24/7 Sports, Luke Doty was a 4-star recruit, the #4 dual-threat quarterback, and the 86th best player in the class of 2020. So, how would he end up doing in Columbia? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Going into 2020, the Gamecocks were still under head coach Will Muschamp, and he was going to be behind a couple of players. They had brought in Colorado State quarterback transfer Colin Hill, and also had blue-chip 4-star 2019 commit Ryan Helinski. Unfortunately, he would regress by the end of the 2019 season, so he was sort of on the outside looking in. In 2020, Doty would end up appearing in a few games, most notably getting ample time against both Missouri and Georgia. Against Mizzou, he threw an interception, but at times did show some flash. He threw his first career touchdown against number 9 Georgia, and then also had a touchdown against Kentucky. While he did play ample time in those 3 matchups, he was honestly not very good at all, but you couldn't really blame him. He threw for 405 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 picks as a freshman. Going into 2021, things were interesting. Doty was the unquestioned starter, but he got hit with a major roadblock. He'd sprained his foot in the first week of preseason practice, and this would create an interesting situation at South Carolina. Zeb Nolan was hired to be a graduate assistant for the Gamecocks, but he was thrown in to be the starter. They also had Jason Brown, an FCS transfer, and Dakereon Joyner. Those 3 guys would split time at the beginning of the year, and none were any good at all. He ended up coming back for 4 midseason games, as after Nolan would get hurt against Georgia, Doty would come in and throw for a touchdown. He also had a touchdown against Kentucky, threw for 255 yards and a touchdown in a win over Troy, and then later on had 2 touchdowns in a win over Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, he'd re-injure his foot against Vandy and would have season-ending surgery. He ended up finishing with 975 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 picks. He appeared in 5 games and suffered 2 injuries. This was definitely difficult, and while he could have complained and got down on himself, he didn't. Former Gamecocks quarterback Connor Shaw said, quote, "I don't know if Luke's ever had a bad day in his life. If he has, he hasn't shown it. He's had plenty of opportunities to get down on himself and get discouraged, and he chose not to." He definitely could have had an excuse to be really upset going into 2022, as Beamer would bring in former 5-star quarterback Oklahoma transfer Spencer Rattler. There was no way that Spencer wasn't going to start, and Doty would have to be fine holding the clipboard or being situational. Last season, he'd end up appearing in 3 total games. He threw a touchdown in their horrific blowout loss to Georgia, had a touchdown in a win over Charlotte, and also had a rushing touchdown against South Carolina State. That was all he had for the 2022 season, as Rattler would take over and had a couple of magnificent games against both Clemson and Tennessee, but other than that, was just your average starting quarterback and at times was somewhat disappointing. But Rattler will be back in 2023, as he will use his extra year of eligibility and try and both help the Gamecocks get better and to help his draft stock. What does that mean for Doty? Well, it means he's probably going to be a backup once again. So far, he's only started 6 games in 3 years. However, it's not really been about that for him. At the end of the day, he just wants his team to win, and that's all he cares about. There is no question about how committed he is to the South Carolina program, and he truly bleeds garnet and black. In a world where quarterbacks are always transferring, many have wondered why Doty has even stuck around. Heading into his 4th year, he's seen it all. He's seen multiple coaches leave and stay, he's had to learn new play styles, has had injuries, has had a short leash, and has had a lot of outside noise for being disappointing. He could have entered the portal, but he didn't. He said, quote, "My parents told me that if you take football out of it, where would you still want to go to school? Would you still want to be in this city, state, or town, or all those things? And would you enjoy it without playing football?" Doty said, "My answer has always been yes." So yeah, while on paper, Doty has been a bust, you can't question that he's an important piece for South Carolina, and I personally don't think his story is done yet. He was ranked highly for a reason, and if Rattler gets hurt or Rattler struggles, Doty will get his chance, and it would make for a great comeback story and could maybe lead to him revitalizing his career. I don't really know the answer to that question or if it'll happen, but college football always seems to do crazy things, and injuries happen, and quarterbacks change all the time, so we'll just have to wait and see. But what do you guys think? If you're a South Carolina fan, what do you think of Luke Doty? What do you think of this year's quarterback situation? And what quarterback recruit or player should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.